Celtics beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
What's up, everybody? Happy, Friday, I assume, anyway. I mean, depends when you're listening, I guess. It is a podcast after all, but we welcome you to the weekend. Happy Deadpool and Wolverine weekend for those that want to go and check that out. I snuck in opening day. It was awesome. Really enjoyed it. If you're a big fan of the MCU and the Marvel franchise and all things Deadpool and Wolverine, then you're in for a treat. But hey, stay away from Deadline Hollywood on Twitter. Thank God I did see it. Block, mute that account. There are spoilers galore all over that freaking thing that I would have been pissed if I saw it before seeing the movie. So just mute it. It's a public service announcement for all of you out there. Now, I'm exhausted. I'm on like 3-4 hours sleep from work last night, but I'll tell you what, we have a very special guest that you can already see if you are watching versus listening, and that is Chris Mannix from Sports Illustrated. When Chris says, hey, I can do the show, but I got to go early, you set an alarm. You get up to talk to Chris Mannix because we have just a great article I want to talk about and all things Boston Celtics, obviously. Morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How we doing?
Good. Well, I don't know who has had the chance to read it yet, but it came out yesterday as we sit here now. So I hope everyone has. And if you haven't, do check it out. In Sports Illustrated, if you still get the magazine, and there's just nothing better than actually having the magazine in your hands. This is one of those like frame-worthy covers as well for you, Mannix, if that's in the plans. I'm not sure. Jayson Tatum on the cover of the 70th anniversary issue of Sports Illustrated. He's holding a champagne glass, basically that Leo DiCaprio meme that everybody sees on Twitter all the time. The story is called "The Celtics Define Greatness in Any Era." It is, of course, written by you, someone who's been around this team for really your entire life in one form or another. And the article, just to spoil a little bit for the people, details the early days of the Celtics, the dynasty that was ushered in by Red Auerbach and Bob Cousy, eventually, obviously, Bill Russell, and sort of skips all the middle part of, the Big Three era and Larry Bird and everything, acknowledges him, but gets to where we are now, and Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. It's really sort of a compare and contrast between Cousy in particular, the 96-year-old legend who is still living in Worcester, came here for Holy Cross and never left, and Jayson Tatum and, the mid-20s superstar and what he has already accomplished and looking to continue accomplishing in the NBA. And again, a really fun article. Before we get to some of the specifics, and I think some really, noteworthy quotes from this piece, what was it like putting this one together?
It was fun, and in a way it was maybe a little more rushed than I wanted it to be. Now for context, this is the 70th anniversary of Sports Illustrated. And in addition to the Celtics being the winningest team in NBA history in terms of championships, they're also the most successful team of the Sports Illustrated era. I think they have one more championship than obviously the Lakers, the Montreal Canadiens, I think, are on that list. And when this issue was being put together in, February and March, because we do have that kind of runway when we're putting together a monthly magazine. You don't necessarily think about putting the Celtics or Tatum on the cover, but then mid-June rolls around and the Celtics win the championship, and they are the winningest franchise in the magazine's history. So all of a sudden you want to do something on the Celtics. Coincidentally, the first NBA player to ever be on the cover was Bob Cousy back in 1956. And Cousy, fortunately for all of us, is still alive. He's, right now weeks away from his 96th birthday and still living in Worcester. So when I phoned Cousy up and asked him if we wanted to talk about kind of his, the halcyon days of the Celtics, he was on board. Tatum was on board with working with us on the cover. So it all came together really over, I want to say, a maximum of 4 days from like the first interview to when the story had to be written and obviously sent to be edited. But even though it came together a little faster than I would have liked, I enjoyed the process of getting to know Bob a little better and certainly spending some time with Jayson.
Yeah, I guess my question is, at what point does Bob Cousy become like a part of this story? Is it something going in that you're like, we got to have, considering the scope of everything, Bob's going to be included right away? I liked in the beginning where Tatum picks up the old cover of Cousy saying, wow, this is really cool from 1958, 56, 58, right?
He didn't believe it was a real 56. He didn't believe it was a real picture at first. Like he looked at it, because look, photography in the 1950s is a lot different than what it is today. And there is kind of a watercolor-esque aspect to some of the photos that are presented from that era. I wanted Cousy involved immediately. Once I was told he was the very first NBA cover, and I've got a little bit of a relationship with Bob. I've talked to him on the phone in the past over the years, and being from Boston, I read every time Shaughnessy calls him every 4 months to talk to him about something going on with the Celtics. So like, I know he's still sharp and he still very much follows the game. And I really wanted to link these two guys and those two teams together to give people kind of a viewpoint of what the Celtics were back then to how they became what they are now. And Cousy, he's involved on multiple levels. Number one, he's one of the greats from, the first Celtics championship team, but Cousy also founded the Players Association, right? Like Cousy laid the groundwork for building the association that has become a powerhouse today and has helped the players generate billions of dollars in annual revenue. As Cousy said, he kind of jokingly said, back in my day, I held out for $9,000 so Jaylen Brown could get $300 million. Like, so there's a lot of spider webs connecting Bob Cousy and his generation to Tatum in this one.
And it is, again, it really is just the two voices. It's Cousy and Tatum in this article. It's not like other guys talking about these two guys. It's these two, in the string connecting the generations. And again, the NBA as it's grown over the past 70 years as well. There's one part in particular, it's a little bit long, but I want to read it because I just think it's really illuminating as far as, just something Tatum hasn't really talked about elsewhere before, despite all the interviews that he does. And it's about the relationship between he and Brown and whether or not, this is something we've talked about on this show. It's something that people have talked about for years, whether Tatum has been as publicly, as outwardly supportive of Jaylen Brown as he should be, or people feel he should be. So it says, as you wrote, Tatum will cop to some missteps over the years, but he insists he never wanted Brown to be traded. Most stars, this is the quote, don't make a conference finals until 27-28. We were doing it at 19-20. He does admit, however, he could have been more vocal. I've always told him maybe I should have done a better job of voicing my feelings in the public eye. He always knew that I wanted him to be here. I would always tell him, man, I don't get involved with any of those talks. I never went to Brad Stevens or any other player like, I want this guy in. I want this guy out of here. I show up. I want to do my job, play basketball. Looking back in those moments, I don't know. I didn't know how they could affect somebody because I was never in that situation. I feel like maybe I could have done a better job of publicly saying, no, we don't want anybody. We want JB. I was always just like, I want to stay out of it. I think that's a really interesting quote for many reasons, one of which is I'm wondering when exactly you talked to him, because this was something that yet again, I think we were talking about this last week, Ev, was a question, an issue of whether or not Tatum was supportive enough of Jaylen Brown not making Team USA when it was Derek White and Tatum went on his kind of social media hissy fit, for lack of a better way of putting it. And Tatum was asked about it and was sort of like, there are a lot of guys that deserve to be here. And he wasn't really like, hey, Jaylen deserves to be here.
Yeah. So I talked to Jayson about a week after the championship. So this was well before what happened with USA Basketball. And I do put the USA Basketball stuff in a bit of a separate category, right? Because I don't believe that Jaylen Brown is upset with any of the three Celtics that are on the USA Basketball team. I believe he's most irked with USA Basketball for, not naming him coming off the kind of run that he had, and with Nike, who he name checked on social media as well, and who he firmly believes had something to do with him being boxed out of that team. So I don't think there's any lingering tension or will be any lingering tension because of what happened with Tatum and Derek White and USA Basketball. If you remember, after Tatum won his gold medal a few years back, there was that picture of Brown celebrating with him. I think it was in Vegas. So like I think they're fine on that count. But I did find it interesting that Tatum was so outwardly open about kind of the missteps that he did make along the way, because it seems like Jaylen Brown has had a rough go of it in Boston, and not anymore. Now he's golden, but like, from the very beginning, nobody really wanted him here, right? Like his draft selection was booed on draft night. It seems like we in the media have been trying to trade him, and I include myself in that, for the last 7 years, right? Like whether it's for, Kevin Durant most recently, or Kawhi Leonard, or Anthony Davis. I mean, you name, whenever their superstar's name comes up, because the Celtics at that time had a cache of draft picks and, movable contracts and a quote unquote star in Jaylen Brown, we were, all putting him on the trade block. And I think that Jason's biggest regret, based on our conversations, was that he didn't do more to squash those rumors before they ran wild, right? Like you didn't often hear from Jayson Tatum about that unless he was asked directly about that. And I've never got any sense. I've now written 2 cover stories involving Tatum and Brown going back to 2022 after their run to the finals. And people on and off the record would all tell me like, there's no issue here. Like they're very different people, right? Like they're not going to be hanging out every single weekend, chopping it up. Like that's just not who they are, but they're great as teammates. They're very much friends in a sense of the word, and there's no issue between them. But I think Tatum's regret is that he didn't do more to let everybody know that Jaylen was his guy. Like he's long believed that, and he's long wanted to play with him, but he didn't do it. He doesn't believe he did enough over the years to make sure the public at large knew that. And he felt like if he did, maybe we wouldn't have been in the kind of situations we were in the last few years where we're constantly talking about trading Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I want to go back to that, actually, that cover that you wrote 2 years ago, because we had you on after that piece was what had come out. And it's interesting to see the difference, right? You're getting those 3 guys after the NBA Finals appearance versus now you're getting Jayson Tatum off his first championship. What was the difference between Tatum in those 2 interviews? Or is there any difference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, stark. I mean, Tatum, during that interview in 2022, there was a tension to him there. Like I don't want to call it a sadness, but that was fresh off the offseason right after they lost in the finals. And that was a tough offseason for Jayson Tatum. He told me during this most recent interview that, after that season ended, he really started to have some doubts about whether or not he could be the guy that leads a team to a championship. That was the first time in his career that he questioned maybe his own ability, at least as far as being, the star, the Giannis or the LeBron or the guys that are the alphas on championship teams. He got over it. Couldn't really pinpoint when he got over it, but he said he got past it. But that was a tough time in the basketball life of Jayson Tatum. This was our conversation, just last month. The word I would use to kind of describe his demeanor was almost relief. It was certainly one feeling that he had, like, it's over. I went through all that. It was incredibly difficult, but I achieved what I wanted to achieve. We achieved what we wanted to achieve. And now we move forward. So it was just very different attitudes, very different feelings coming from Jayson Tatum in those 2 interviews.
Quick break from today's show to tell you today's show is brought to you by Game Time. I remember first time I went to a Sox game when I was a kid. The Milwaukee Brewers were in town. And literally, my only memory of that is Mo Vaughn, my favorite player at the time, hit a home run. It was my grandparents. It was like the only time he went to Fenway Park. It was a really special memory for me. Great memories of your own today with the help of Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And the prices on Game Time, the app, that go down and the closer gets the first pitch. And like my parents do this all the time. They like to go wait till the first pitch is gone and then go to like whatever ticket box office and just see what they have left and just snack up great deals. Do that with Game Time, with last minute deals, all in prices and views from your seat, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And literally, folks, Sox, red hot. They have had a fun season so far. They're in this great ride of a 2024 with no expectations, kind of hanging on the wild card. We love that. Use Game Time to get to Fenway or whatever stadium you want to go to throughout the rest of the summer. Again, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it, they got it. And you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. So make sure you take the time and take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't personally spoken with Tatum as you have, obviously, but just listening to him, it almost, the word that comes to mind, it sounds euphoric. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
He's just in this place where everything that he has been not told he couldn't achieve, but all the doubters, all the skeptics, you know, in recent years saying, as you just alluded to, like that inner self-doubt of, you know, can I be one of those guys? Can I get over the hump? And, you know, him acknowledging he and Brown as teammates, he even said it, like all the words that we in the media say, he said it. He said, like, we learned to coexist. Well, now he's got the banner, Chris, and he's won a gold medal and he's chasing another one. He's basically, at an individual level, done everything you can do other than win an MVP and win a finals MVP. And, you know, I know that he said, and I imagine it was genuine, that he's happy that Brown got the finals MVP, you know, as someone who's really gotten the short end of the stick for a number of years in a lot of different ways, and some of the ways that we talked about. But now going forward, I don't even know if he needs this. Hopefully he doesn't. But in the same way that Tom Brady would always talk about needing that next thing to motivate him, or constantly reminding himself, hey, I was pick 199, and that sort of us against the world thing. You know, what now drives Jayson Tatum going forward, knowing that he is still in his, you know, mid-20s, just entering his NBA prime years by historical definition? I know he wants multiple rings, but is it that simple? It was, I've got one, now I need two to continue to be in that conversation among greats, because true greats win more than one, or is there something else?
Yeah, I think it is the winning more than one to establish himself not just as a true great in the NBA, but as a true great in Celtics history. I mean, remember, Jayson Tatum came to Boston with zero knowledge of the Celtics. And I mean, like, zero, right? Like, you know, there's that great story of how he didn't know who Cedric Maxwell was until he watched that ESPN 30 for 30. Like he didn't know the organization. He knew, you know, Kuzi and the name to a degree. Obviously, everybody knew who Russell was, but he didn't have any kind of connection to this franchise. Over the years, he has built some of those connections. Obviously, Max is around all the time. He got a chance, remarkably, to meet Larry Bird for the first time at the last All-Star weekend. And I think Tatum, from talking to him, he started to recognize that to be, you know, considered one of the guys that belongs up in those rafters, like multiple championships is what gets you there. Now, there have been guys that have only won one, most recently Pearson Garnett. But he's looking at it like, I want to be known along the same lines as Larry Bird, who's got multiple championships, Russell, Kuzi, Havlicek, Heinsohn. Like, these guys, you know, you're not going to get to 6 championships for Kuzi, 10 or 11 for Russell, but he's looking at the next step of his legacy being a multi-time NBA champion. Yeah, he's 100% still motivated by the individual stuff. Like he wants to be the MVP. There's no doubt about that. And look, even though I believe him when he says he was happy for Jaylen Brown winning Finals MVP, of course he wants that. He's a highly competitive guy. Everybody in the NBA who is competing on that stage wants to be Finals MVP. I bet Luke Cornett went to the Finals thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if I could be Finals MVP? Like everybody wants that distinction. It's a feather in your cap. Doesn't mean you're not happy when your teammate wins it, but everybody certainly wants it. I think Tatum at some point in his career wants that. So there are individual accomplishments that I think are going to fuel him going into next season and beyond. But bigger picture, he's motivated to be one of those all-time great Celtics that walks away from this team with multiple championships on his resume.
Yeah, it's one of these things where it's like, I think some people call it like the disease of me versus, trying to be more team oriented after you win the first one. This will be interesting to see how they kind of, because look, it hasn't always been easy for these guys. Like they've made it more difficult. And one of the things as you look at their playoff run, I thought it was pretty evident, in the past, they let Atlanta get to 6 games, they would fool around a little bit. They lose games at home, against Philly. That's got to go longer than it should. It felt like this year, Chris, that there was just, again, a little bit more maturity to the group, whether it was the influx of Drew Holiday or guys just understanding the journey is hard every single year and you got to bring it. Because like you look at their road, 5 games, 4 games, 5 games. They didn't waste any time. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing I think after everything is clear, the dust is settled, the one thing that I take away from a lot of the season is these guys have had so many hardships, but they've learned, they've grown, they've matured, and now they just seem like a more well-tuned unit. And as you look around the league at teams that are going to be in the spotlight in a different way, maybe for the first time, like you look at the Knicks, right? The Knicks are going to be way up there in super contender status with the Celtics, with the additions that they've made. Philly's going to be under, I think, potentially a different type of scrutiny this time around. It's always been kind of fun and lovable with Joel Embiid, but now Embiid's kind of, and even with these Olympics, facing a ton of backlash here. So as you look at the Celtics and their maturity over the years, do you think this gives them a leg up to repeat, to become the first team to repeat since the Warriors did it with Kevin Durant?
Yeah, they've got a window here. There's no doubt about that. It's at least 1 year, could be 2 years. We don't know how the ownership situation is going to shake out and what new ownership feels about paying the kind of tax penalties that are coming for this team in the future. But there is a window that's open. And look, as far as how they have used the failures of the past to get them to where they are today, that's now part of the DNA of the new NBA team. Like, I don't think we're ever going to see again what we saw happen in 2008, where the Celtics brought a bunch of new guys in, 2 new superstars in, and were able to put it all together in 1 year and win a championship. I don't even think you're going to see a situation like we saw with the Miami Heat, or, I mean, you're certainly not going to see a Kevin Durant to Golden State type of situation ever again. Like, this is the new NBA is where winning championships takes time, right? And we saw it with Denver just a year earlier, where after the Nuggets won their championship, one of the first things some of their guys said at the podium after the game was like, look, this is a product of all our previous failures. All the time we came up short in the postseason, the first round loss, the second round losses, all the bumps we took along the way. Same thing with the Celtics. You go all the way back to that disaster of the 2018-19 season, and all the way through, from the failure in the bubble to what they did in 2022, the Miami series from a year earlier. Like, everything, they were hardened over the years to get them to a place where they could be the team that went 16-3 in the playoffs last year. I'm telling you, they're only going to be beat by another team that has gone through that. Like, I look at Oklahoma City as being maybe the biggest threat to the Celtics next year, because they took some lumps in the postseason this year. They got beat in the second round. They reacted accordingly. They went out and got the guys they need. They got a rebounder in Isaiah Hartenstein. They got another defensive player in Alex Caruso. They're going to have problems getting out of the Western Conference, because that is still going to be a dogfight every single year. But if that team can find its way to the NBA Finals, that team to me is a threat. I look at the Sixers on paper, and yeah, on paper, they look like the biggest threat to Boston in the Eastern Conference because Paul George is a legit 3-and-D guy. Embiid's an MVP, and Max is going to take another jump. Did some nice things off the bench. We have no idea how that team's going to play. No idea what it's going to look like when they all get together and start to play next year. The Knicks, they make a bunch of moves. Great. Got more Nova guys playing in New York, but I think there's like 4 all-star appearances in that starting lineup, and Julius Randle's got like 3 of them. So like I still look at the Celtics as having a huge opportunity to put together the kind of mini dynasty that was thought to be dead in the modern NBA.
So OKC is exactly who I was going to bring up, and I agree with you. I think that team is winning within the next few years. I don't know that it's next year. I think they may take some of those lumps like Denver and some of these other teams, get hardened by that, as you put it, and ultimately win a championship. And they are so incredibly young and have that litany of draft picks that Presti has accumulated, and they can continue to add to that team. I love the Thunder, big fan of the Thunder. As far as Philly goes, and look, again, for those watching, Syracuse hat. I'm a Cuse guy, I'm a Carmelo Anthony guy, but I just think that when I see Joel Embiid and Paul George, I see 2 Carmelo Anthonys, guys that are going to have, Hall of Fame kind of careers, but don't actually win the big one. And I realize you're not a winner until you are. That's just kind of the way it works. But I just don't see those guys, especially together, ever getting over the hump. But when it comes back to Boston and this window and this, potential for a mini dynasty here, not to take this away from Tatum, I know he's been our focus, and it is a star-led league. And a lot of people believe that in today's NBA, coaches really don't matter. But I keep kind of coming back to Joe Mazzulla and what a psychopath he is in the best possible way. The fact that he is already in his downtime, this guy doesn't have his feet up watching movies. He's, sitting here and thinking about new schemes and new plays and altered systems and ways to win the next championship. That is his focus. Basketball and Jesus, anyway, our life, obviously, for Joe Mazzulla and family. And so when you consider him as, again, a mid-30s guy being the leader of this team, how I guess do you see he and Tatum and Brown in particular and all of those complementary parts, everybody, including Sam Hauser, now running it back for next year? How much of a figurehead to all of this is Joe to now winning multiple titles?
Look, I think the head coach is incredibly important. That may seem like an easy thing to say, but like if coaching superstars was easy, there would be a lot more coaches with championships on their resume. Like coaching a team with this kind of star power requires more than just X's and O's. It requires an ability to connect to players. And Joe Mazzulla, I think, has done that. Maybe some of that is the fact that he's sort of from their generation. Like he's a little bit older, but not that much older than some of the guys on his roster, younger than Al Horford on his roster. So I think his ability to connect to them has been just as important as the kind of X's and O's in-game coach that he is. And he was a dramatically improved in-game coach last season. I think we'd all agree on that. Like how many times did we talk about Joe's weird use or non-use of timeouts during his first year? Well, we didn't really talk about that quite so much in his second year. And I think Joe benefited greatly from having a coaching staff that made sense on his bench. Like when Joe took over Ime, he had kind of a bunch of guys there that were really Ime's guys. And I'm sure some of them thought they should have been elevated to head coaching spot when Ime exited that team. You fast forward a year, and you've got Charles Lee on that bench. You've got Sam Cassell on that bench. You've got Jeff Van Gundy out there as a sounding board for him, as a coaching or a team advisor. I think he learned a lot because of the changes that were made to that bench. And I think that's something to watch for next year. Charles Lee is gone. Jeff Van Gundy is gone. Are they going to replace some of that brain power on their bench and in their front office with people that Joe can work with? I think that'll be interesting to watch. But I do think that he has gone from what I think a lot of people believed was a liability after his first year to one of the strengths of this team after his second year.
Yeah, and sometimes continuity helps, right? The fact that you have
Always.
the same guys on the team, for the most part. You have Drew and KP obviously coming in is a different thing, but having continuity helps. Having the same voice kind of helps, and so that's why you look at what the Celtics just did and say, like, there's so much movement in the NBA all the time, and the content machine feeds off of this movement, right? It's. I mean, this is maybe better than other people do. A lot of traction and content views and clicks comes in the off season from all these things about, hey, look at who might go this way and this way, this way. I know our company, our network sees a huge uptick in views during that sweet spot of the off season where free agency is kicking off and the draft's getting ready to go. It's just, it's monster.
Celtics are kind of boring in the off season now.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, especially for the Celtics, because like they're done. We're all set. There's no major moves to make. We're good. But essentially, what I love to see is the fact that continuity can really mean something. And as you look at the NBA landscape, and I'll talk even internationally, like that game against Sudan, that exhibition game, where they jacked up a bunch of threes to try and hang in that game and almost beat USA in the process. Do you see the Celtics in their team building philosophy having impact not just only on NBA basketball, but international basketball as well?
Well, I hope so when it comes to USA basketball, because I believe that USA basketball, regardless of what happens during this Olympic cycle, they need to make substantive changes. Like, I don't think you can rely on, throwing together the best talent the Americans have to offer every 4 years and expecting to win. That just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, like, think about like, how many NBA games would South Sudan win? Like 3? Like, honestly, like, and that's not an insult. Like, and I wrote about South Sudan and how Luol put that team together. Same thing with Germany. Like Dennis Schroeder, Daniel Tice, and the Wagner brothers. Like, how many NBA games would that team win? Like 9, 10? Like, I don't know. Like, it
threatened the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, I mean, really, like, so. It's not about the talent that you have on the roster. It's about the talent that the chemistry the talent has playing together and the passion with which they play for. And you can tell watching these games, like South Sudan plays with a passion that eclipsed USA basketball. Germany plays with a passion that eclipses USA basketball. Like, these guys on the USA roster, not that they don't want to win. Of course they want to win. It's why they're there. It's why they're spending their off seasons, traveling the globe to play for USA basketball. But they've been kind of drilled from a young age to believe that NBA championships are what matter. Like, we're here to win NBA championships. Everything else is secondary. It's not the case in these international games. Like, they think the FIBA World Cup is awesome. Like, these guys, they want to win on the international level just as much or more that they want to win at the NBA level. And I think for USA basketball and Grant Hill in particular, like, after this is over, I think you've got to find 12 to 15 guys, maybe 18 guys to work on injuries that want to play for your team for the next 3 summers. Like, you need guys playing international games next summer, year after that, World Cup, into the Olympics in LA in 2028. You're not going to get the best players to do that. I heard Anthony Edwards already said something to the effect of, like, I'll be back next Olympics if you want, but probably not for like a World Cup cycle. Like, you need guys that want to play every offseason. And maybe you're talking about just a handful of all-stars, some good rotation players on the international stage. If you get those types of guys playing consistently together, they're going to have a lot of success. They're probably going to go into the Olympics next summer as the favorite. So that's where I think Celtics team building, that's where it can have a place on the international stage. As far as the NBA goes, it's already there. Like, Oklahoma City has built its team in the image of the Celtics. Like, the Thunder, the only guys they go out and chase are guys that can do like 5 different things. They want guys that can shoot, pass, play multiple positions, shoot the 3 ball. Like, that's who they've put together. Everybody on that roster. I saw a video of like Isaiah Hartenstein at the Thunder facility jacking up threes. Like, he's going to become a 3-point threat at some point this year. That is who the Celtics are. They put 5 guys on the floor that shoot threes, 5 guys on the floor that can guard 4 different positions. They have become the model for the modern NBA team. Oklahoma City is nipping at their heels, following it. But believe me, there will be other teams out there in the years to come that are looking at Boston saying, we want to build our team the exact same way.
So one thing that I find really interesting this offseason, I'm curious as to your perspective, obviously, is the fact that, as I mentioned before, they're running it back. You know, a lot of the time in sports in general, or even in business, when, you know, a major organization is going to be sold, there's something of a tear down, a strip down, selling off pieces to make it more, you know, just, I don't know, sort of clean it up to make the books look better as far as, you know, offloading it. When it comes to the Celtics, it's quite the other way right now. I mean, they're just going out and spending money like candy, with the, you know, future perspective of, well, whatever, who cares? It's not our money. You know, somebody's going to inherit all of these contracts. It becomes their problem at some point in time. And the Celtics, while I mean, they're not like spending like fans or anything like that, but it's so rare, I feel like, that a front office in its behavior and a fan base in their wants are so directly unified. I mean, fans have been screaming for months on social media, extend Derek White, give Sam Hauser a new contract. And a lot of us were sitting around saying, yeah, I mean, that'd be great, but, you know, are they really going to do it? Are they really going to spend you know, what it takes to bring these guys back? And sure enough, I mean, everyone, your top 9 is coming back next year. Were you at all surprised by the spending behavior of ownership, you know, right down to Stevenson's Aaron and Austin Ainge and everybody else involved to where we are now, where they said, hey, I mean, we were a powerhouse last year, let's do it again?
No, I wasn't surprised for 2 reasons. One is that ownership has always told Brad Stevens that if there's a guy that you believe can help us win a championship, go get him, we'll pay for him. But if it turns out he can't help us win a championship, well, you know, we're not going to spend money to clean up your mistakes. And I was kind of reporting on this a couple of years ago when the Celtics were looking at Jakob Poeltl back when he was available via trade. They had a hole at center, and that's when that messaging first kind of came to me. Like, you know, like, well, you want to go trade for Jakob Poeltl, and you know what he's going to want as a free agent the next summer. Go ahead and do it. But if you trade for him and he sits on our bench, we're not going to pay him. Like, you're going to wind up losing at least 1, maybe 2 first-round draft picks for nothing, because we're not spending money on guys that are not going to help us win. All the guys the Celtics spent money on this summer helped them win, played vital roles in helping them win. The Tatum extension obviously was a no-brainer. You give him that every day of the week, twice on Sunday. Derek White, big contract, but not the biggest for sure. And Derek White certainly is invaluable to what this team does when it comes to winning a championship. And Sam Hauser, yeah, that's a big number when you factor in the tax penalties that go with it, but not this season, right? Like, he's still on that short change contract for this season. So you're looking at you know, guys that you're going to have to pay down the road, where if you did need to break this team up for whatever reason, Sam Hauser in that contract, very tradable. Peyton Pritchard on his contract, very tradable. Derek White, if you wanted to deal him, very tradable. So you're not putting yourself in a position where you are going to be stuck with a whole bunch of guys making a whole bunch of money that nobody wants. Like, you can deal some of these guys for shorter term contracts, draft capital, if you really want to. And that's where I think the pressure comes with the Celtics. I think regardless of who owns this team, if the Grousbeck family winds up selling it end of this year as they plan to do, or even if they keep owning it for a year or 2 down the line, if they win championships, I think they'll be able to keep this group together, and whoever the ownership group is will spend the money. But if they come up short, and I'm even talking about a finals appearance, if they don't win a championship, that's when I think they put some of these roster pieces in peril. Like, look, maybe Sam Hauser might be in peril anyway, because who knows if Bailey Sherman can wind up being Sam Hauser 2.0. Like, you know, maybe if you can get a cheaper alternative in a first round pick, you know, that might be the direction they elect to go anyway. But if they win the 2025 NBA championship, then I believe this exact same group will be back again the following year. If they don't, then there's the potential to see 1 or 2 guys kind of peeled off to reduce some of this tax burden.
Yeah, and there's quality coming back if you peel some of those guys off. I mean, the one thing that was very striking to me, Sam Hauser signs a contract, and I'm like, wait, Duncan Robinson got $90 million like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What is this? Is going to be cake. I mean, it's not like Sam Hauser's a scrub. The guy holds up pretty well defensively for himself and shoots the lights out. And now that he's gotten some NBA Finals experience under his belt, he's an extremely valuable commodity. So it's not like you said, they can't get out of these things. And
in today's game, like one of the advantages the Celtics have in getting guys on team-friendly contracts is that because of the uncertainty with the free agent landscape, if you offer guys good deals, they're going to take the bird in the hand more maybe than they used to. Like maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was perhaps more motivation to go to free agency and try to get the bag. And there's still some of that motivation out there. Brandon Ingram right now in New Orleans is kind of dealing with some of that where he wants that full max, and the Pelicans and maybe other teams as well aren't motivated to give it to him. But now you're seeing a lot of extensions out there, with a year left on their contract where guys are saying, you know what, maybe there's a chance if I have another great year, I can get even more. But there's also a chance that the market could crater a little bit. Teams don't have the kind of flexibility they used to because of these new tax rules. This is a really good deal. I'm going to take it, and it becomes a win-win for both player and team.
Chris, before we let you go, as we talked about a little bit, the Paris Olympics are upon us, obviously, and I'm curious as to your expectations for Team USA. For everybody, obviously, it's gold or bust. I certainly recognize that, but are we going to see games that are as close as they have been in some of these international friendlies? Are they going to flip that switch, turn it on, and it'll be a romp? And also, who is their biggest challenger? Certainly from a betting perspective, for anyone out there in that space, I've seen a lot of people betting on France to medal, for instance, and be the non-USA winner. You can bet on who's going to win the thing outside of the Americans. The heavy favorite, France, is the one that keeps getting the bulk of the attention. How do you look at the top of the board there?
I'd like to say as objectively and analytically as possible, I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in these Olympics. Honest to God, like I don't. These are like this exhibition season has offered no insight whatsoever in predicting what this team is going to look like. Like, I watched the game in Vegas where they kicked the crap out of Canada, who is right there as a gold medal favorite along with the U.S. They beat Serbia by 26 over in Abu Dhabi. Then they go to London and need 2 Herculean efforts from LeBron James to pull out games against South Sudan and Germany. So I have no idea what this team's going to look like. I think there's some variables here, right? Like they've had about, or will have close to a week of practice time to continue to try to build chemistry, maybe develop some new wrinkles in that offense. So one thing I noticed watching the U.S. team is like, you watch some of these other teams play, there's a fluidity to which they play. And it goes back to what we were talking about with years spent playing together. The U.S., it's a lot of high pick and roll. It's a lot of high to mid post ups. It's a lot of isolation basketball. Even if you have the kind of talent the U.S. team has, that's not enough. Like that's not going to work consistently on the international stage. The other factor is Kevin Durant, who's arguably the greatest player in USA basketball history, still very much an elite scorer. This was described back in Vegas, guys, his injury as a minor calf injury that won't keep him out very long. Well, fast forward 2 or 3 weeks later, and we're still not sure if this guy's going to be able to play on Sunday when they take on Serbia. If Kevin Durant can play and be the guy we've seen in previous Olympic cycles, I think they're once again a clear favorite to win a medal. If he can't, any one of these teams can beat them. There's probably a half dozen or more teams that can knock them off. The group play, which looked like the easiest part of the U.S.'s bracket with South Sudan in there and Serbia, all of a sudden it got a little bit more complicated than it looked like maybe a week or so ago. So I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I'd still put my money on the U.S. I still think they are a favorite to win the whole thing. But if they win a gold medal, I wouldn't be surprised. If they don't medal at all, I wouldn't be surprised. That's how much I think latitude there is with this team this year.
Check out Chris's article again in Sports Illustrated, on Sports Illustrated's website. It's online. It's on Twitter. It's everywhere. It's on the SI feed. It's on Chris's feed. The Celtics retweeted it when Al quote tweeted it. Al Horford and talking about the champ, Jayson Tatum. It's a very easy article to find, and it's a fun read. It is called "The Celtics Define Greatness in Any Era." Mannix, I always enjoy when you hop on with us, man, and obviously enjoy the Olympics the rest of summer. I'm sure we'll talk to you again as we get closer to the season.
Anytime, guys.
All right. Well, hope everybody has a great weekend, especially if you are listening on Friday. Make the most of it, and enjoy the Olympics. It's going to be nonstop for the next month or so. It's going to be a lot of fun. For Evan Valenti, I am Adam Kaufman, obviously for Mannix. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll talk to you again next week.